So first of all, I just want to say good morning. And it's so wonderful because I see so many faces of students who took my undergraduate course, and now you're either BSW or MSW, so I'm really excited about that. So my job is to talk about sexual harassment today, and I'm talking about it because I'm the liaison with the School of Social Work, and so I will have my email address, etc. But I play a role in terms of if there are issues in the school, things that come up, that you can come to me, talk to me, etc. But I'll go into that more later, okay? I'm also, as y'all know, is this working okay? I'm also very informal, as you know. So y'all are just welcome to ask me questions throughout. You don't have to wait till the end, okay? So this is what I'm hoping to cover. So I am going to go over some terminology, and I'm sure that for the most part people are going to know the terminology, but I think it's good just so that we all are talking about the same thing. And then once I've done that, I really want to talk about field. I want to talk about sexual harassment within your field placement. So that's where the focus of my talk is going to be. And so I want to talk about what are the fears that can prevent us from reporting, and then what do you do? So something happens in field, what do you do? What is your next step? Okay? So that's what I'm going to cover. Sometimes people feel like, oh, that's really not an issue, right? It is an issue. We have had issues in the past of sexual harassment by clients, by even people at the agency that you're working. So this is a topic now that we really hone in on because we want you to know what to do. We don't want you to feel like I just have to suffer with this, okay? All right. And remember, lunch is after this, so there's bright times ahead. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is consent. And I think more and more people know that consent has to be a free and clearly given yes. It is not the absence of a no. It's not because I didn't say you can't touch me that you can touch me. I have to say you can touch me. Okay? The other thing is it's ongoing. It's not that I said you can touch me and then because I said it once you can just do whatever. So at any time it should be that I as a person can withdraw that. And I'm not just talking about women, I'm talking about men too. Men also face sexual harassment, sexual assault. Okay? Consent to one type of sexual activity does not mean consent to another. So maybe I consent to oral sex, but not to intercourse, right? So it's not a, oh, she consented to that, so we can just go for the gusto. No. And then past consent does not equal current consent. I serve on the non-academic misconduct committees and hear cases on where students have brought forth sexual assault by maybe a peer, etc. And oftentimes this comes up. Well, you know, she or he never minded in the past, so I just assumed that it was okay. No. Okay? So you have control over your body. You have a right to have that control over your body and what happens. So the other thing is, and this kind of relates to field in some way, so in terms of the physical force, coercion, intimidation, or other threats, so that is not consent. If somebody is threatening you and you feel like you have to say yes and you say yes, it's really not consent because you're being forced to. Someone is using their power, their authority, or whatever over you to get that consent. That's not a freely given consent. So that's different. Capacity in terms of being impaired to really make a decision about personal conduct and then unconscious with alcohol, etc. So when there's an impairment that really prevents you from giving that consent, you may give it, but if you're so impaired, you may not know what it is you're doing, okay? So there's like physical force, there could be impairment, and people often say to me, well, if I was drunk, it's my fault. No. Okay, so consent, are we good about consent? The biggest thing to remember is freely given yes, not the absence of a no. Okay, so sexual harassment, unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, physical conduct, and express behaviors of a sexual nature. This is what we, in terms of field, sexual harassment can be many things. It can be the request, but also the behaviors of a sexual nature. It could be that someone is making making signs that are very sexual in nature, touching you, and maybe trying to use it as, oh, I'm just leaning up against you, so I'm touching, in this case, your breast. Those kind of things. So it's really important that, again, there's no consent to that, right? No consent. So that's sexual harassment. Someone is harassing you. It could be with harassment that they're also sending you texts. So maybe someone at work at your field placement is sending you text after text after text. So you look really pretty today. I really like that dress. So what did you do last night? You want to do something? It's that, and you say no, and we're colleagues, and it continues and continues. That's sexual harassment. Or continuing to make it to where you're touching. Any of those kind of things are harassment and not something to tolerate in field with colleagues, clients, supervisors. Okay. Unwelcome basically means you didn't request it, you didn't invite it, you haven't asked for it, right? And it's for you don't desire it, and you actually find it offensive that this person is, could be your agency supervisor in field, could be a colleague, could be a client, but it is offensive, and that there's power differentials in play, okay? When I used to be a hospice social worker, and when I was a hospice social worker, now I had a client and he was dying, but he wasn't bedridden yet. And he approached me, made sexual advances. And, what I did was I stepped back and I said, so this has to stop or I can't be your social worker. So some people would say, but he's dying. Maybe just don't say anything. But I wanted to make it clear to him this was not acceptable. And I told him, I really want to be here to support you in your dying process, but I can't do that if you're going to continue this behavior. So I was really clear with him. And I asked him, I said, so what's your choice? Do you want a new social worker? And he said, no, I want you. And I said, okay. Then we got a deal, no more of that. And he said, we got a deal. And he was really good about it. So, it's that you're going to have clients even after you graduate. And so that being firm and setting clear boundaries, just because there are clients doesn't mean that we have to accept any kind of misbehavior. Make sense? All right, and then, so just to say, these are kind of examples, because sometimes it all becomes about sexual intercourse. But it can be this, like I said, this repeated request for dates. These jokes, these endless jokes every time you're around them. I remember I had a colleague before I became a professor, and this colleague always was telling me dirty jokes, always. And I finally had to say, you need to stop that, because they were very demeaning towards women, and I felt like he was doing this on purpose. So it can be something like that, or like I said, the texting, etc., or just bothering you day in and day out. Sexual assault, a form of sexual harassment. So we talked earlier about sexual harassment. So sexual assault is a form of that. And here, it's sexual contact without any consent. It is always the perpetrator's fault. It is not yours. You don't give consent, it's not your fault, because it's a freely given yes. It does not make a difference if the victim's been drinking, and if the victims, a lot of times, even today we still see this about, well, she was asking for it because of how she was dressed. So it's her fault based on that. So it's also really important to note that that has nothing to do with it. It is about the consent piece, okay, and it being freely given. So to round this up, I want to say no one, absolutely no one, deserves to be the victim of sexual assault. These are our bodies, male or female, or however you identify, your gender identity, it's your body. And you have a right to make a decision about what happens, okay? And that is in field, which is where we're going to go now. So anybody got any questions at this point? I'm usually not this serious. It's, you know, this is a serious topic for me. I usually make lots of jokes. Students that have had me before know. Okay, so now I want to talk about field very explicitly because I want you to know what to do if this happens. So first I want to talk about the fears. We have had students in the past that didn't come right away to us when they were being sexually harassed, fondled, etc. They didn't come to us, but that's because they really had some fears about their field, what would happen with their field placement. So Audrey's probably talked about your agency supervisor weighs in on your field grade, right? So if it's your agency supervisor who is the one that's texting and harassing you, then you might worry about what's going to happen with my grade. What's going to happen if I lose this field opportunity? Maybe this is really, you know, I really wanted to be placed at a Grace Hospice, and I'm placed there. And now this is happening. I don't want to lose my field placement, so I'll just put up with this. Fear of getting a bad job reference. A lot of times students want to use their agency supervisor as a reference. For BSWs, it can be to get into the MSW program. For BSWs and MSWs, when you graduate, it could be for jobs, right? Because they can attest to your clinical skills. So sometimes that's a concern. And these are the things that we've heard from students in the past. And then fear of rejection, that we are going to see you as a complainer and a troublemaker, you know, and none of these are true. We are going to be here for you, and I'm going to talk about that. So worrying about your grade, your field opportunity, the bad reference being troubling, none of those do you have to fear. Fear of not being seen as a team player. Everybody always hears, take one for the team. Not this one. You don't take this for the team. Fear of being seen as you don't have a sense of humor. Anybody ever been told that when someone has told a joke that was really demeaning and you say, hey, you know, I don't want to hear that? And I've been told that. Well, you just don't have a good sense of humor. No, I just don't find that funny. I find it offensive. Fear of being labeled overly sensitive. Will people in your field placement see you as overly sensitive? Will we see you as overly sensitive? Fear of not being believed. We will believe you. Fear of being wrong. Don't doubt yourself. You know, the thing about social workers is we have good guts. And a friend of mine, a social worker, talks about it's like this small voice that we hear, that gut, and that we hear that small voice that says, this is not okay. But sometimes we squelch it and we say, well, I'm sure it was accidental that that person touched my breast or whatever. But listen to that small voice. Don't doubt yourself. Come and talk to us, okay? So these are all the things that we've had students who have waited in the past to talk to us, and it's been for those reasons. And I think that students are doing better since we've started talking more specifically about sexual harassment in field, because we really want you to know before you go into field, we're going to support you, okay? Hopefully this is not an issue for you. Hopefully your field experience goes well. But if there is an issue, then what do you do, okay? So, first of all, this is kind of that voice. Don't dismiss your feelings. Those are your feelings. If you feel like someone is in your space, is harassing you, then honor that feeling. Don't dismiss it. Know that it's not your fault. I don't care if you did wear a low, now I'm going to say something about a specifically female dress, a low cut, that none of that, how you dress, makes it your fault. Document the behaviors. When it happens, write down, and this is so not to prove to us. This is not about proving to us that something happened. It just helps us. It helps Audrey and Amanda when they begin to handle this, because you've kind of written down some of what's happened, because they're going to be dealing with whoever is doing it. And then find someone you feel comfortable talking to confidentially. So I'm going to tell you in a moment that it's really that you can come to me, you can come to, and of course, hopefully Audrey and Amanda, because they're the ones that can deal with it. But sometimes you want to run it by somebody. Sometimes we sit with it and we just feel like, I don't know if I can actually take that step of going and talking to Tracy or Audrey or Amanda or an advisor, Belinda or Mary. But you know what? What you could do first is talk to somebody you trust. And then ask that person, will you go with me to talk to Tracy, Amanda, or whoever? And that is totally fine. And feel free to bring that person with you. Sometimes it's really hard to go in alone, okay? So, what you can do is, we strongly encourage you to start with your field instructor and kind of talk with your field instructor. Now, we encourage you, but we don't say that you have to talk to your field instructor, okay? Because you may not feel like, you know what, I don't really feel a relationship with my field instructor. She's a fine instructor, but I don't know if I can talk about this kind of stuff with her. And so that's okay. Then go ahead and you can talk to Amanda, myself, or Audrey, because eventually that's where it's going to be dealt with anyway. So, but if you feel okay about it, you can talk to your field instructor, and then your field instructor can go with you to talk to Audrey or Amanda or myself, whichever you choose. And like I said, you can bring your field instructor. You can also bring a friend. So we just want you to feel supported, and we want you to feel as comfortable as you can feel. Okay. Talk with your field. You can then, a lot of times, if it's a client, what you want to do is you want to talk to your agency supervisor and your field instructor. Because in this case, it's not a colleague at the agency, you know, it's not the supervisor, it's a client you're working with. So the first time I ever had an issue around sexual harassment from a client, I did talk to my supervisor. So the next time, and at the time I told you about, I was very prepared for what to do, because my supervisor was very clear about what I could do, and that was stand up for myself. So talk to your supervisor, let your supervisor know what's going on, and definitely let your field instructor know, and so that they both can be supportive. And then, so a lot of times we'll talk about, supervisors might talk about contributing factors. You know, they might say, well, you know, the person has, you know, is diagnosed with a mental health disorder. But those may be contributing factors, but it doesn't excuse the behavior. And you don't need to go back and experience that. So that's left to the agency needs to deal with that, okay? Because the agency's job is also to make sure that you're safe, okay? And then what will happen is you'll make an action plan. It could be that that action plan is that you don't see that client anymore at all. And so it's that client's given to someone else. It could be a variety of things. But your field instructor and the agency supervisor, they're going to work that out with you. And then the other thing to think about too is the agency supervisor and field instructor. Your field instructor is going to let Audrey and Amanda know. And so I want you to know that ahead of time, because it's really important that Amanda and Audrey know these things, because if we're having trouble with an agency, they need to know that, because then we need to rethink whether anybody should be placed there, right? And so it's really important that we trust the sites where we place you. So it's really important then that that the field instructor, that eventually it always has to get to Audrey and Amanda. But I will say this about Audrey, Amanda, and myself, is that you will have confidentiality. We'll talk with the agency. We are going to work that out with the agency. Maybe you will be removed from your placement, but it won't be a punishment. But they'll find you a placement that is right for you and where it's safe. And then maybe you won't have to be removed because maybe the person is a colleague and that person has had some issues before and they're going to let that person go. I mean, there could be a lot of different outcomes to this. So I just want you to know, I think the big takeaway from all of this is that don't put up with behavior, any type of sexual harassment, etc., sexual assault, none of that. Let us know and go to who you trust. And we will tell you who we're going to tell, and really so that you know that, and it won't be other students, it'll only be the people that need to know in order to address the agency, the supervisor, etc. Okay? And then the last thing is that there are resources on campus, and the resources are, so UHS now has violence prevention and survivor services. They actually do counseling. I've had students that have used them and found them to be so very helpful. And let me say, this is not just in terms of field, but also in terms of just your life, if something happens to you on campus. The Rape Crisis Center, we work with them quite a bit. Our students, actually a lot of them volunteer on the crisis line. Domestic abuse intervention services. I've also had students who have had issues with domestic abuse from partners, etc. And then Unidos is another one that is a Latino organization focused on domestic violence within the Latino community, but they also, they're open to anyone. And I think that's kind of it. So I just want y'all to have a good year. I want you to have a safe year, and I want you to know that you have our support. I do want to say one more thing, and that is you may hear there's been, with Title IX, there's been a lot of talk about who are mandated reporters on campus. That is, if you come to that person has to report to the university. Faculty are not mandated reporters. And social work was really involved in this because we did not want to be, faculty did not want to be mandated reporters. So faculty aren't mandated reporters unless they're like an advisor to a student organization. If some way they're working with students more formally, but like people that work in housing, et cetera, they're mandated reporters. And what that means is that breaking of confidentiality. So I just want you to know that, because it could be that you want to start with a professor, one of your professors you just feel close to and you feel like, I want to go to them and I want to talk to them about this. They are not mandated. Okay, so they can keep their confidentiality. And before you talk to anyone, you can always say, are you a mandated reporter, before you say anything. Okay, so any questions before I stop? I am so good. All right. Nothing? Okay. All right. Well, if you need anything, know that I'm always happy to talk to y'all, okay? And congratulations on being here. Eventually, it always has to get to Audrey and Amanda. But I will say this about Audrey, Amanda, and myself, is that you will have confidentiality. We'll talk with the agency. We are going to work that out with the agency. Maybe you will be removed from your placement, but it won't be a punishment. But they'll find you a placement that is right for you and where it's safe. And then maybe you won't have to be removed because maybe the person is a colleague and that person has had some issues before and they're going to let that person go. I mean, there could be a lot of different outcomes to this. So I just want you to know, I think the big takeaway from all of this is that don't put up with behavior, any type of sexual harassment, etc., sexual assault, none of that. Let us know and go to who you trust. And we will tell you who we're going to tell, and really so that you know that, and it won't be other students. It'll only be the people that need to know in order to address the agency, the supervisor, etc. Okay? And then the last thing is that there are resources on campus, and the resources are, so UHS now has violence prevention and survivor services. They actually do counseling. I've had students that have used them and found them to be so very helpful. And let me say, this is not just in terms of field, but also in terms of just your life, if something happens to you on campus. The Rape Crisis Center, we work with them quite a bit. Our students, actually a lot of them volunteer on the crisis line. Domestic abuse intervention services. I've also had students who have had issues with domestic abuse from partners, etc. And then Unidos is another one that is a Latino organization focused on domestic violence within the Latino community, but they also, they're open to anyone. And I think that's kind of it. So I just want y'all to have a good year. I want you to have a safe year, and I want you to know that you have our support. I do want to say one more thing, and that is you may hear there's been, with Title IX, there's been a lot of talk about who are mandated reporters on campus. That is, if you come to that person has to report to the university. Faculty are not mandated reporters. And social work was really involved in this because we did not want to be, faculty did not want to be mandated reporters. So faculty aren't mandated reporters unless they're like an advisor to a student organization. If some way they're working with students more formally, but like people that work in housing, et cetera, they're mandated reporters. And what that means is that breaking of confidentiality. So I just want you to know that, because it could be that you want to start with a professor, one of your professors you just feel close to and you feel like, I want to go to them and I want to talk to them about this. They are not mandated. Okay, so they can keep their confidentiality. And before you talk to anyone, you can always say, are you a mandated reporter, before you say anything. Okay, so any questions before I stop? I am so good. All right. Nothing? Okay. All right. Well, if you need anything, know that I'm always happy to talk to y'all, okay? And congratulations on being here.